Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for signing up to this webinar. We're starting dead on 10 as we've got a lot to get through. Today, we are here to discuss the consultation on the implementation of plan making reforms, the elements that are linked to those parts of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which relate to plan making. I'm Martin Hutchins from the Planning Advisory Service. Big part of our job is supporting local planning authorities to understand and implement changes to the planning system. And this session today is typical of one of the ways that we do that. I'm joined by my colleagues, Rachel Ferry-Jones, Stephen Barker and Peter Ford, who are helping out behind the scenes today. So thank you to them. Most importantly, we are joined by colleagues from the DLUHC team that have been working on the consultation. Presenting to us today, we have Max Leverak, Chris Mountain, Dan Evans, Dashiell Shaw, and the Chief Planner herself, Joanna Everly, who will be introducing things in a moment. So welcome to all of the DLUHC team. Today's session is an information giving session. This is why we have turned off cameras and microphones for this session. If we have time, there will be a Q&A session after the presentations. This will be based on, and thank you for all of the questions that we've received in advance. We do appreciate those. The DLUHC team has taken these questions into account when preparing today's presentation, and they'll be answering some of them directly and clarifying points as they go along as part of the presentation. So thank you, that's helped inform things. Your questions will also help inform the design of the 5 in-person events we are hosting at various locations around the country in September. Details of those will be shared later on. This will be an opportunity to work in person with ourselves and DLUHC colleagues on the proposals and your questions in more detail. So I do encourage you to try and get along to those if you can. We have a Slido, so you can ask and rate questions throughout this session, and for 24 hours after today's session, you'll have been sent the link to access Slido in the joining instructions, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. The chat function in Teams is also switched on for this session, but we'll mainly be working off of Slido to capture questions. If we don't manage to get to your question today, we are working with DLUHC afterwards on publishing a set of FAQs, and these will be based on those questions we receive. So please do ask as many questions as possible through Slido today. Thank you. We are also recording today's session, and we'll be making it available along with the slides from today's session on our website. So there we are. That, I think, is the first 2 questions that we normally get answered straight away. So I'm now going to hand over to Joanna Everly to start us off. Morning, Joanna.
Hi, Martin, and thanks very much for hosting us today. It's really amazing to see that we've got 481 people on this call. So wishing you all a very good session. And really, I think what really strikes me in terms of this is a really important moment. The team, obviously with inputs from many, have been looking at what is the role and purpose of local plans and how we can bring them firmly into the 21st century. And that's been a journey, obviously, from the white paper through to the Levelling Up Regeneration Bill and now the condocs. It's a really important moment, and I'm seriously delighted that we've got so many people joining us today, and we'll look forward to the Q&A. A few words of introduction from me. I just wanted just to recognise that we've been doing planning for quite a long time. So a document I've got here, which I'll have to turn my camera mood music off for, which is basically, believe it or not, from December 1929, and it's the Greater London Regional Committee first report. We've been doing planning for over 100 years, and I think what's fascinating is that our challenges today are so different to what they would have been 100 years ago. And what Raymond Unwin, no less, was writing in 1929 was talking about the fact that, you know, planning is complex. You have to deal with the issues in isolation, whether it's transport, open space, development, but actually the answers come forward when you actually look at those things in tandem. You layer them, and we try and figure out about how change comes about, which brings many benefits, but it relies on many inputs. And I think the consultation doc highlights really sort of how we move from, to some extent, 20th century local plans into 21st century local plans, and the power potentially of the data at our fingertips, the data that we can bring to bear, and the knowledge that that gives us, and to some extent the power it gives us to understand our context much better. and if people haven't seen it, the digital work that we're doing in terms of bringing that data very much available to everyone is really, really powerful. But also how we use digital to engage communities. But at the heart of it, it's about how the plan itself, the vision for change that for places, the policy that then informs decision making, actually brings forward all those sort of benefits and actually deals with some of the challenges, particularly say city resilience in terms of heat or climate change or the role and purpose of landscape and green space and so on and so forth, and the quality of our homes and our neighbourhoods. So you're going to hear a lot about the condoc. You're going to hear about the fact that it's about how we make it a process that's rich in content, but clearer in intent, and also sharper in terms of content. That's quite difficult to do because I suppose our planning system and our local plans in particular have got bigger and longer and more complex. But how do we really focus on the important things and actually make local plans a process of true engagement with our communities and a dialogue about inevitable change and positive change for places, and take communities with us on that journey? So with great thanks to the team, I'm going to hand back to them. They are the experts who've been working on all of this work over the last months, and we really look forward to the dialogue and the conversation with you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joanna. This is where I get to say next slide, please, to Martin. Brilliant. So what we are consulting on, this is all pretty self-explanatory. Oh, sorry, I should have said, I'm Chris Mountain from the local plans team. Sorry about that. So we've got core local plan stuff in the consultation document and associated requirements, documents, arrangements, 16 chapters, between 1 and 5 questions per chapter. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we are not consulting on in this document, we're not consulting on provisions that are in the bill, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which I will call either the bill or the LURB at various points today. So there have been just a handful of housekeeping amendments made to the plan making parts of the bill during parliamentary scrutiny, apart from the substantive CLA community land auction clauses, which were added in at Colin's report. We're expecting royal assent of the bill by the end of the parliamentary session, so before the King's Speech, which is in diaries for the 7th of November. We are not consulting on MPPF changes. We intend to confirm the immediate MPPF changes this autumn and to launch a consultation on further MPPF changes that before the new plan making system next year. We are not consulting on the key plan making implementation dates, which are set out on this slide, or on supplementary planning document transitional arrangements. These were covered in the consultation in December 2020, and this document we're published confirms those. It confirms them contingent on royal assent for the bill. And we're also not consulting on local plan commissioners, which are in the bill. We're developing proposals on those. We're also not consulting on the new alignment policy. We intend to cover this in the next MPPF consultation. So we've got June 2025 for submission and December 2026 for adoption under the current system, and the new system ready to go live for autumn 2024. And now I hand over to Max for plan content. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we're going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the various chapters of the consultation document, starting off with plan content, as Chris has already mentioned. So Joanna in the intro already touched on the key role that plans play in the system, including directing and guiding where development goes, what it looks like, and what's needed to support it as well. And of course, bringing communities sort of along the journey too, and keeping them informed and engaging them throughout the process. But we feel that to some extent, these purposes are undermined by the way in which the content of plans at the moment is produced, collated, and presented to its main users. We want new style plans to be simpler, shorter, and more visual, showing more clearly what is planned in local areas, so that users can engage more easily. And we want to create the right environment to support this change by supporting authorities all the way through this transition. Now, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill already supports this change by defining clearer parameters for the content of plans, and the proposals that we're consulting on through this document would build on and complement these changes in 4 key areas. So firstly, by establishing in policy a series of core principles around what plans should contain, ensuring plans focus on the right things, and that users can really understand the story of how the area will change, how the right outcomes will be secured, and how this will contribute to good placemaking and environmental enhancement. And we'd like your views on the principles that we have set out in the consultation document. Secondly, we're proposing to add a requirement in regulations for plans to contain a vision. Now, we know that visions can be a really critical tool for sort of really telling the story of change, but at the moment we think they're too long, sometimes too generic, not really focused enough on places. So we think visions in the new system should be more focused, specific, and locally distinctive, establishing measurable outcomes for the plan period and really providing that golden thread for the plan's policies and allocations. And we're also emphasising the positive role that a key diagram can play in articulating the vision and the spatial strategy for growth. Third, we're proposing to provide in policy principle for how local development management policy should be prepared. Now, this is considering the intended introduction of the national development management policies, which, as Chris has already mentioned, will also be consulted on separately at a later date, and the aim to make local plans more focused. Finally, on content, we are intending to produce, in close collaboration with the sector, a series of templates for specific components of plans. Now, on this, we're really keen to engage with the sector to understand where such templates could add the most value, and we want to ensure that they're designed to ensure greater consistency between how plans are prepared and presented, but also still afford a lot of flexibility for local circumstances and for local innovation as well. It's worth highlighting that these proposals link strongly to some of our other proposals around digitalising plans, and we're going to come on to those a little bit later in the presentation. So I'll hand off to Dan now, who's going to take us through the next few chapters.
Thanks, Max. So the next slide is around the new 30-month plan making timeframe. So currently only 35% of local planning authorities have adopted a plan in the last 5 years, and we know that they take a long time to prepare, around 7 years average, but in some cases longer, and this creates uncertainty. As a result, we've previously proposed that local plans and minerals and waste plans should be prepared and adopted within 30 months, and this intention remains. We believe a 30-month timeframe strikes the appropriate balance between needing plans to be made more quickly and kept up to date more effectively, with a realistic view on what is achievable. There are recent examples of planning authorities making a plan in just over 30 months within the current system, making 30 months realistic as a timeframe across all planning authorities once the reforms are introduced. We propose to establish in regulations that plans should be prepared based on the following key stages and activities. A scoping and early participation stage, including requirements to notify the public and stakeholders and invite participation in the plan. A plan visioning and strategy development phase, including the first formal consultation on the plan. A phase of gathering further evidence and drafting the plan. And then finally, a phase of further engagement, proposing any changes and submitting the plan for examination. More details on these stages are set out in the document, so I won't go into detail here. To avoid an inflexible system, we don't intend timings for all these stages and regulations. However, we propose to set out some policy that authorities should adopt their plan at the latest 30 months after the plan preparation process begins. So in other words, following commencement of the first gateway assessment, which you can hopefully see, it's very small writing, but on the diagram on this slide, and Max will cover later. We intend to use policy and guidance to establish more detailed expectations of around what planning authorities should do at each stage of the process. Through the consultation, we're asking for your views on how best to set the 30-month time limit and your views on a new project initiation document to help define the scope of the plan and be a useful tool throughout the plan making process. The project initiation document would set the scope of the plan and identify evidence required to ensure that it is sound, identify local issues likely to be relevant, set out the project management, governance and resourcing arrangements and any risks, and outline the approach to engagement. It's designed to be a plan for the plan, to get the process off to a good start. It would help anticipate any issues that might be expected over the plan making period, and identify solutions which could include agreeing particular delegation or resourcing arrangements. We propose to provide more guidance on the project initiation document, including a digital template. Next slide, please. So on to digital. Our ambition is to bring planning and plan making into the digital age, as Joanna mentioned, and transform how things are done for better, to help produce faster, simpler, more accessible plans and policies informed by up-to-date data and shaped more actively by communities. A considerable amount of work is taking place within government on how plans and plan making might be digitised, and the consultation seeks to give a flavour of this and to ask for your views on our direction of travel. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill allows us to prescribe a common format for standardised data across plan making, and this is designed to ensure that open, standardised data can drive an improved plan system. We think this should be supported and complemented by a toolkit of services and products that will help planning authorities to prepare plans more quickly and more accessibly. And some examples of what a toolkit could contain are shown in the diagram on the slide and in the consultation document itself. However, we also know that digital transformation will evolve rather than happen overnight. This consultation is an important opportunity for us to hear from you about your needs, about the challenges and opportunities that you see ahead, so that we can approach this change with ambition, but also pragmatism and realism. We're therefore seeking your views on the information produced during plan making that would most benefit from standardisation or open publication, the challenges faced in the current system, where digitisation could support better outcomes, and opportunities for digital tools and products that should be prioritised to deliver improvements in how plans are prepared and used. Next slide, please. So the next chapter is about plan timetables. So we know that local development schemes and minerals and waste development schemes, which are currently produced, can be long, complex, technical, and sometimes out of date quite quickly. As a result, it can sometimes be difficult for communities and other stakeholders to understand when a plan will come forward or when they can get involved in the process. The bill replaces the existing requirement for a development scheme with a new, simpler requirement to prepare and maintain a local plan timetable or minerals and waste timetable, and sets out the types of information they should include. We propose to require planning authorities to prepare their proposed timetable consistently, reporting against the same milestones in the same way. As part of this, we intend to use regulations to bring about a shift from a document-based requirement to one which will make the relevant data publicly available in a prescribed digital format, and also in a format that everyone can understand. We also propose to set out a requirement for planning authorities to revise their timetable at least once every 6 months, or earlier upon reaching a key milestone in the plan making process. So we're therefore seeking your views on what information, in addition to that prescribed in the bill, should be included, when planning authorities would be required to update them, and the format in which timetables should be prepared and made available. Thanks, and then, next slide. Thanks, and then the next chapter is about the evidence base and tests of soundness. So the amount of evidence produced to support a plan and to demonstrate that it is sound against the tests of soundness set out in the NPPF takes a significant amount of time and resource to produce. We want to make sure that evidence is proportionate to meet our ambitions for a 30-month end-to-end timeframe, as well as allowing planners to focus on other important activities, including visioning and community engagement. However, a strong evidence base will still be expected to inform and support plans. Evidence will remain an important part of plan making, allowing planning authorities to develop robust and effective plans and allowing them to be communicated and scrutinised. We proposed in a previous consultation amending the tests of soundness against which plans are examined, removing the justified test, and the government is currently considering the responses, and a decision on whether to implement this proposal will be confirmed when the framework is updated. We don't think there is a silver bullet in reforming plan evidence, and so we're considering a number of changes which, taken together, will reduce the amount of evidence required, but still ensure that high quality plans are delivered. So firstly, being clearer in national policy and guidance around evidence expectations, and how it should be treated at examination. As part of this, we want to be much clearer about what an overall proportionate evidence base looks like. We've heard from the planning authorities and the wider sector that more clarity on this would be really beneficial. And as well as this overall definition of proportionality, this could also cover what is considered proportionate for particular evidence topics or studies. However, it's important to note that clearer expectations should not mean more work for planning authorities in order to meet these expectations. On the contrary, it should allow them to have greater confidence that the evidence base is appropriate and that overproduction of evidence does not take place. Second, and related to the above, is the increased standardisation of key evidence and data. Previous engagement with the sector has indicated that standardisation would help provide greater clarity on what is expected and reduce discussions around specific methodologies at examination. Standardisation also presents opportunities to make better use of data and digital processes and tools. However, standardisation will need to reflect that for some types of evidence, there may not be a one-size-fits-all approach, and also that planning authorities need to be able to reflect their local vision and context. Thirdly, the potential of freezing of data or evidence at certain points in the plan-making process, with the aim to reduce iteration and delay. There are a few suggested ways in which this could work in the consultation document, and we're really keen to hear your views on this suggestion. And we're also asking your views on whether to require authorities to only submit to examination those supporting documents that are related to the soundness of the plan. And of course, some of our wider measures should also help to reduce the evidence burden, including the intention of having more focused plans and the support provided through regular gateway assessments, which Max will now cover.
Thanks, Dan. So a key challenge in the current system is the number of local plans submitted with unresolved issues. Now, this can result in significant delays at examination and in some cases the withdrawal or failure of plans altogether at a very late stage in the process. Now, not only does this waste authorities' precious resources, it creates uncertainty and it leaves areas more vulnerable to speculative applications for development. Existing advisory visits from planning inspectors can go some way to addressing this, but they're only optional and they often take place too late in the process to be able to genuinely help with resolving issues. Now, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, requires authorities to seek observations and advice from a person appointed by the Secretary of State at times that will be prescribed in regulations. We intend to use these provisions to introduce mandatory gateway assessments or gateways into the new local plans process to support plan makers much earlier. The gateways will be designed to ensure that the plan sets off in the right direction, to ensure that the plan is complying with legal and procedural requirements, to help stakeholders and other users of the system monitor and track progress with plans, and perhaps most critically, to help to resolve potential soundness issues earlier in the process. We're proposing to introduce a requirement in regulations for planning authorities to undertake 3 gateway assessments. The first would take place just before the 30-month process begins, after the scoping and early engagement phase. The second, partway through preparation of the plan, and the third, prior to submitting the plan for examination. Each gateway will have a slightly different focus, tailored to the stage of the process, and it is important to highlight the distinct role that they'll play. So while the first and second gateways will be of an advisory nature, the third will have a binding role, ensuring that prescribed legal and procedural requirements are met before the plan then proceeds into examination. By the third gateway, any unresolved issues related to soundness would need to be considered further and resolved at the examination, and that's to ensure that other views can be taken into account in reaching a decision, and we'll say a little bit more on examination in a moment or two. But the intention ultimately is that the first and second gateways are more focused on resolution of emerging issues, so that these can be addressed earlier in the process, and hopefully there are then fewer issues that need to be taken through and resolved at examination. We think the gateway assessments, firstly, should be carried out at key stages of the plan making process, rather than at precise timings, so long as sufficient notice is given to the relevant parties, that they should last no more than 4 weeks, wherever possible, to support authorities in delivering against the 30-month timeframe. We don't want them to become a burdensome process, that they should be routinely undertaken by planning inspectors, although we do think there is a role for alternative or additional assessors to support at certain stages. So, for example, at the first gateway, where we think maybe more hands-on tailored support might be needed in order to set the plan off in the right direction. And finally, that the overall process should be overseen by a gatekeeper organisation to ensure a high quality and consistent experience for planning authorities. Now, we were asked a question before the session about whether authorities could skip a gateway in certain circumstances. We don't think that that would be necessary, because we're keen that the assessments are reasonably flexible and responsive to what local authorities need at different points in the process. And we're also not sure it would be appropriate, given the role of the gateways in helping to shine a bit more of a light on where the plan has got to with its preparation. Now, we set out initial proposals in the consultation document for how the gateways process might work. I'm not going to go into every single stage. I encourage you to go away and have a look at that in a bit more detail, but I just wanted to highlight sort of a few things that we think are particularly important here. So we think that consistency with a degree of flexibility will be key to the success of the assessments, so that all parties know what to expect from the process. We're therefore exploring the role of digital templates to ensure a consistent and efficient approach to the inputs and outputs from the assessments. For example, that might be to support authorities in showing how they're complying with legislative and policy requirements, or to support assessors in preparing observations and advice that's timely and also focused. We also think that to maximise the value of the assessments, the first and second gateways will need to incorporate interactive workshop sessions to allow issues to be worked through in a supportive and flexible environment. Noting our ambition for the gateway assessments to operate at pace, we're not proposing that other parties should be invited to participate in gateway workshops or contribute to the reports, but we do recognise the significant potential value that the final output from the assessment could play in signposting key stakeholders to areas where they might have a role to play in helping to resolve any issues that come up through that process. Finally, to ensure the gateways are sustainably financed and delivered to a high quality and consistency, we propose to fully fund them through cost recovery from planning authorities. Next slide, please, Martin. So I'm going to say a few words now on the examination. So an examination public by an independent inspector provides assurance that the plan is sound, as well as an important opportunity for scrutiny and for those with an interest in the plan to have their say. So examination, including the existing right to be heard, will be retained, and it will remain a critical part of the plan making process. We also believe that the overall examination process, the existing mechanism in its current form, broadly continues to play to meet those aims, I should say. But we also recognise that examinations do take much too long, which doesn't align with our aim for plans to be prepared and adopted in 30 months. So what we're proposing is that examinations of plans in the new system should take no longer than 6 months. If a consultation on proposed modifications to the plan is needed, this should add no more than 3 months to the overall examination process in addition. We're not proposing to regulate for this, but over recent months, we've been working really closely with the Planning Inspectorate to explore what can be done to ensure that examinations are faster, more efficient, and ultimately deliver against these timeframes consistently. We set out a range of proposals, which for the most part would be delivered through changes to the Planning Inspectorate's procedural guidance on local plan examinations. I'm not going to go through all of these proposals in detail now, but we're keen to hear what you think and are very open to other ideas and suggestions that you wish to put forward. One change we're making to the examination process through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill is the introduction of a new power for inspectors to pause the local plan examination for a time-bound period, which we're proposing should be no more than 6 months. This change formalises a mechanism through which issues with local plans or minerals and waste plans can be properly considered and addressed by planning authorities outside of the examination process without needing to withdraw the plan and start again. The aim of this change is to get more plans in place more quickly, but also end the practice of never-ending examinations, which can still in some cases result in the failure of plans if challenges are found to be insurmountable within the context of the examination. In the consultation, we set out more details about how this process would work, and we welcome your views on this. I'll hand over to Chris now. It's going to take us through the next few chapters.
Thank you very much, Max. So we've got a community engagement chapter. So you've already heard about our commitment for communities to remain at the heart of the plan making process and for local people to be able to have a meaningful say on the planning policies that will affect them and their local areas. It's worth pointing out that the bill removes the formal requirement to prepare a statement of community involvement. We're proposing to create a requirement for LPAs to outline their ambitions and approaches to engagement consultation in the new project initiation document. LPAs will need to outline their approach in that document, and this might include the techniques they'll use, including digital tools and the resources and skills required. So we've confirmed that we'll retain the 2 existing formal consultation periods, and we're proposing a new early participation requirement that Dan mentioned earlier in regulations, and this is for LPAs to notify stakeholders and invite early participation on matters that might shape the direction of the plan. This is about increased transparency and an early opportunity for interested parties to have sight of and to influence plan making. So this new requirement would sit within the scoping stage that you've heard about, prior to the start of the 30 months and before that first mandatory consultation window. And LPA approaches on engagement will be subject to independent oversight through the gateway assessments to ensure the authorities are on the right track. As previously announced, we're going to produce new guidance on community engagement setting out best practice and guiding principles for local plan engagement activity. And to provide further support and encourage ambitious approaches, there'll be digital toolkits that will distill the learnings from the PropTech Engagement Fund. If you haven't seen any of the outcomes from the PropTech Fund yet, do search it up. It's on the localdigital.gov.uk website. There's some really fascinating insights from Watford, Birmingham, Leicester, Chelsea, many other areas. There's a failing football team joke there, but I'll just leave that. So in this chapter, we're seeking views on community engagement and the project initiation document, the new early notify and invite proposal, a clearer role and purpose for those 2 mandatory consultation windows, and on the templating of representations. So now we're on to the requirement to assist with plan making chapter. Thank you. So the bill provision on this would give LPAs the power to legally require that prescribed public bodies provide assistance on local plan preparation. We're proposing to set out which organisations are within that definition in regulations, and we're proposing to include important infrastructure providers like utility companies, as well as other bodies of a public nature. And we're seeking views on the proposed prescribed public bodies that the requirement may apply to, and a proposal to generally reserve the use of this power for cases where the LPA isn't getting the engagement or the information they need. Now on to the monitoring chapter. Thank you. So through the bill and subsequent regulations, we're proposing a clearer and more focused approach to monitoring to ensure that planning authorities have a better understanding of how their plan is performing and the impacts of development on the local environment. So we're proposing a light touch annual return and a more detailed return 4 years after the adoption of the plan to inform plan updates. And on this, we're seeking views on requirements and on metrics. And now on to supplementary plans, please. There we go. So supplementary plans will help make the development plan framework clearer and simpler. Our reforms will remove the ability to create new supplementary planning documents and new area action plans. And supplementary plans will have the same weight as other parts of the development plan. They'll be subject to consultation. We're proposing in the document a minimum of 1 formal consultation stage. The time frame for that will be set out in the new local plan timetable. Supplementary plans will be subject to independent examination, and we're proposing to broadly model this on the existing arrangements for the examination of neighbourhood plans. Bill places certain limits on the allowable scope of supplementary plans so that they don't subvert the role of a local plan as the principal local planning policy framework. Site-specific supplementary plans, they'll be able to cover a specific site or 2 or more nearby sites. And then area-wide supplementary plans can set out design requirements. So this may act as a vehicle for setting out authority-wide design codes. So all this will allow supplementary plans to address site-specific needs or opportunities, which require a new planning framework to be prepared quickly, like a regeneration opportunity. But supplementary plans can also build on existing policies in the development plan. So, for example, to set out a design code or a master plan for a site that's been allocated in a local plan. And just on supplementary planning documents, So based on feedback received in the December 2022 consultation, we've confirmed our intention, contingent on royal assent of the bill, for SPDs to remain in force until planning authorities adopt a new style local plan. And this is different to what we consulted on. We consulted on previously that they'd remain in force until the target date for the adoption of that plan. So on supplementary plans, we're seeking views on factors that could be taken into consideration when assessing whether 2 or more sites are nearby to each other, and also on the preparation, consultation, and examination procedures. So on now to minerals and waste. Thank you. Many of the proposals in the consultation apply equally to minerals and waste plans, which of course are being retained in the future system. And in this consultation, we're seeking views on whether there are any unique challenges facing the preparation of minerals and waste plans that we should consider. Now, it is time for me to hand over to Dashel to talk about community land auctions. Thank you.
Hi there, everyone. It's Dashel Shaw from the developer contributions team. So obviously chapter 13 of this consultation is about community land auctions. So we're really keen to get your views on the process that we've set out in the consultation. And Planning Advisory Service have kindly agreed to run a dedicated workshop with us and interested local authorities on the 12th of September. So in that workshop, we can sort of go over it in more detail, because I appreciate it's a sort of fairly complex topic, but just to talk about it briefly here. So they're a sort of model of developer contributions that have been proposed for a while, and they provide an approach for identifying land and allocation for development. Basically a method of price discovery by which landowners will bid to have their land selected for allocation in the local plan by stating the price at which they would sell their land, and that becomes a legally binding option. Piloting authorities will be able to assess the land put forward for allocation, and the difference is that in CLA piloting areas that could include financial benefits that can accrue from CLA options as well. There's sort of the consultation and examination processes in CLA areas will be the same. And then once a local plan is adopted and sites are allocated, the piloting authority can sell the CLA options onto developers in the auction process, or they could exercise the option and develop the land themselves. So overall, the benefit of this community land auctions model, which we're aiming to pilot, is that unlike current system, it's really aimed at that price discovery point and that sort of unknown, which is what is the price at which landowners would reasonably sell their land. So it's sort of using this economics auction theory, and yeah, hoping to put it in good use. So as I say, we're really interested in piloting this, and would hope that authorities who are interested could come to the further workshop on the 12th of September. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Okay, it's back to me. We're now on to the chapters on rollout, transition, and saving provisions. So, as we've said previously, we obviously want to ensure smooth as possible transition to the new system for plan making. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of when we're essentially switching off the existing system, the latest date for plan makers to submit local plans for examination will be the 30th of June 2025. We've also confirmed our intention that those plans in general will need to be adopted by the 31st of December 2026. Again, those dates are contingent on when Assembly bill. And we're setting this out now to provide planning authorities, to provide everyone with as much notice as possible on those dates. On rollout, we're proposing to provide expert plan making support to a first small cohort of around 10 front-runner authorities, and they'll be preparing the first new style local plans. And this is to ensure there's a strong foundation of learning and best practice for other authorities to draw upon. And these frontrunners will be able to start plan making from autumn 2024. We're quite fortunate to have a few colleagues in the team who were involved in the rollout of the 2004 Act reforms, and also when we made significant changes to the NPPF previously as well. So we are trying to learn from what's worked well and less well on previous significant changes. And we're proposing that all the other authorities, they'll be ranked chronologically by the date of most recently adopted a plan containing strategic priorities, grouped together sequentially into groups up to 25, with each group allocated a 6-month plan commencement window, a wave essentially, at which plan making should start. We've proposed some alternatives, and we've also proposed further proposals around the protection from speculative development that would apply. So again, we're really keen for you to get views on those points, on the options for rolling out the planning system for the new planning system, and also on a specific proposal for existing development plan documents and safe policies to remain in force until the planning authority adopts a new style local plan. And we'll be setting out more details on front runners in due course. And finally, in the consultation, we are seeking views on the potential impact of our proposals on people with protected characteristics. So again, grateful for any feedback on that. Okay, that's it. We were supposed to finish on 49 minutes. We've done it. Quite impressed. Well done, everyone. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. It's really good to hear things firsthand. We really appreciate the DLUHC team coming to talk to us directly at this sort of thing. It's a tough job and it is a consultation, so many things are still to be finally nailed down, and your questions will inform the answers. So thanks. I would like to put some of the questions we've received to the DLUHC team before we end. There's been some brilliant and thorny questions in the Slido and in the chat, and we will be using all of these to put together a set of FAQs. But you know, I'm not going to be able to do all of them justice, but if I could just start by putting to the team a few questions. The first one is, let's see, what will happen to the current requirements to review and, if necessary, update local plans? Who would like to take that?
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, so this I think actually this is a question that came up in various different forms in advance, and I suspect it's probably come up in the chat as well. I haven't had a chance to go and have a look at it, but we wanted to really just clarify the point about this. So obviously, the existing in the existing system, authorities are required to review their plan after 5 years and determine whether or not it requires an update. We know that currently causes a lot of confusion. It's quite a complex process, and I think it's open to quite a lot of sort of debate as well, to be honest. So what we're doing is we're replacing that requirement in the current system with a new requirement for planning authorities to start updating their plans within 5 years of the adoption of the previous plan. We think this will be a much simpler and clearer requirement, and updates will need to be subject to full consultation and examination to make sure that plans remain relevant and can take account of any changes that have happened locally. I think the general thrust there is we want to move to more of a rolling system of more regular updates to plans rather than the current situation that we've got.
Okay, thanks, Max. Thanks for that. Another question: the 30-month time frame. What happens? Yeah, there are some points in there saying it's actually a 34-month time frame, but I think that's slightly unfair. What happens if LPAs fail to meet the 30-month time frame?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Dan's touched on this a bit. So obviously we believe that the 30 months is achievable, and there's recent examples of plans being prepared under that time frame in the current system, and we've designed a system that we think should be faster. Our consultation is clear that we want to support and work with LPAs to ensure they've got the skills and capacity they need. And there have been several announcements recently on that front. But ultimately, if an LPA is failing, it's probably worth mentioning that Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill provides for new local plan commissioners. They'll be able to advise local planning authorities to help resolve problems or potentially take stronger action on behalf of the Secretary of State if required. And the bill retains and updates Secretary of State's existing local plan intervention powers. So they will still exist for consideration. That's
okay. Thank you. Yeah, obviously, I think the gateways are going to play a big part in achieving this 30-month time frame, and I think that's going to be a real good subject for maybe us to get into when we do our in-person events and really talk those through with local authorities. Going to squeeze another one in, if I may. I think there's a lot going on, isn't there? Consultations, ones that have ended, ones that are live at the moment. I just wonder, could someone just take us through quickly what's on the sort of horizon on planning reform and the milestones?
Yeah, sure. So I have scoured the DLUHC website just to make sure I'm saying all the right things. I've already mentioned the following on from the December 2022 consultation on national planning policy, we intend to confirm the immediate NPPF changes this autumn and to launch a consultation on further NPPF changes, so the NPPF of the future plan making system next year. The environmental outcome reports consultation, infrastructure levy consultations, they closed in June. We've got the NSIP reform programme consultation that closes in 19th of December. We've got the PDR consultation that closes on the 25th of September. And of course, this plan making consultation that closes on the 18th of October. And again, just to reiterate, the deadlines that we've confirmed for the current system, so 30th of June for adoption, and 30th of June for submission, and the deadline for adoption will in general be the 31st of December 2026. And again, these dates are subject to royal assent of the bill, and that's expected before the end of the current parliamentary session, so before the 7th of November. Thanks, Martin.
Okay, thank you. I think we could probably squeeze one more in. I think one thing that hasn't really been touched on too greatly is the duty to cooperate. I wonder whether one of the team might talk about that and the proposed alignment test and how that sort of fits with everything else that's in the consultation.
Yeah, I can pick that one up, Martin. So just to provide sort of absolute clarity for everyone here, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, subject to royal assent, will repeal the existing duty to cooperate for plans prepared under the new system. But it's worth highlighting that it will continue to apply for plans under preparation under the existing plan making provisions, under the transitional arrangements that Chris has sort of described previously. But I think it's right that we come out and just really confirm for absolute clarity that we're still intending to develop an alignment policy to address strategic and cross-boundary issues. It's clearly a significant priority for the government to make sure that that kind of development can happen in a coordinated way. This is going to form part of future proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. So as Chris mentioned, there will be a further consultation on changes that we want to make to that ahead of the new system coming into force, and these will be consulted on in due course. The current consultation is primarily focused on areas where we need to develop regulation relating to plan making, and also some of the policy and guidance that's needed to support those changes. But the alignment policy will solely be a policy-based test, and that's why the decision was made to defer that to the wider review of the NPPF, so that sort of policy review could happen in a coordinated way.
Okay, thanks, Max. Thanks for being straight with us on that. That's brilliant. Thank you. I think we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to sort of wrap things up. I think I'd really like to thank all of the participants and your questions and the points that you've put in the chat and the Slido, and just to assure you, we really are using all of that information, working with DLUHC to shape the answers to some of the questions and to shape the consultation. Rachel, would you mind just putting up the next slide? I'd really encourage you. I've noted the comments about London being full, and we've taken those on board. We'll have a think about what we can do about that. But there are other places that we're visiting to take this show on the road, if you like, and members of the DLUHC team are going to be with us. And I think we'd really appreciate and look forward to working through some of these issues in person with you. So we'll probably present this sort of stuff again, and then have some workshop elements of the events. There's also the community land auctions event that's online as well. You can access all of these events through the Planning Advisory Service website. I think with a couple of minutes to go, I'd just like to thank my PAS team and thank the DLUHC team for all of your inputs. It's been a really useful session, and we really look forward to following up on these. So enjoy the rest of your morning, and yeah, thank you all for attending, and we'll see you all on the road soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Much appreciated. Thanks, everyone.